Of Friday morning in Meron, 45 people lost their lives. Those who are in Shul Shabbos know we spoke about it on Shabbos. We spoke about it, and I wrote about it on my Facebook page, and we'll write about it in my article this week. I actually was watching the funeral of one of the boys yesterday from America, Donnie Morris. And it went on for like an hour after they buried him. They were all there, hundreds of boys singing, which was, I've never seen that at a funeral before, at a levaya, but it was actually quite inspiring. Exceedingly sad, of course, terribly sad. So I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about some of these things. Not the actual tragedy itself, but in this week's Pirkei Avot, the Ethics from the Father, chapter 5, it says 10 miracles happened in the temple. One of them is they stood, there were so many thousands and maybe millions of people, right, coming to the temple on the festivals. But there was a great miracle that when they were so crowded, but yet when it came time to bow down, there was miraculous room and they were all able to bow down. Now, the Sefufim idea, we spoke about this on Shabbos. The Rashi in the Gemara, when it talks about it, says Sefufim is an idea of tzaf, floating. That means, says Rashi, there was so crowded you had to stand up straight, and it was like you were being transported with your feet off the air because there were so many people. So you can imagine how many thousands of people, but yet there was a miracle that they were able to bow down. So obviously that is something on everybody's minds, right? And after what happened. And I thought I'd talk a little bit about that because you think about the Beis HaMikdash, what must it have been like, how frightening or whatever. So I want to spend a few minutes talking about that. So I'm going to share my screen, which is here, when it decides to work. Right. Okay, can you see my screen? Yes? Right. So this comes from the Chasam Sofer. It's in Hebrew, but I'm going to read it out. The Chasam Sofer says, Nira dehenes, the miracle haya omdim sefufim. The miracle was they were able to stand up straight. Ki hashtachavoya ruchim ein chidush. There's no miracle in the fact that they were able to bow down with so much space. Demuat maxim maruba mamokum kodesh, because it's well known that there's no space, there's no time in holy places. You know, the Aron, it says, never took up space. The idea of space is a physical idea. When you're in a holy place, the Beis HaMikdash, there is no space. And therefore, it's no miracle that they had so much miraculous space to bow down. And he goes on to say, in the second one over here, that's why here, that we see this B'voyom b'chag HaShavuos. This is the Chasam Sofer saying, I saw this when people came to my shul on Shavuos, cause v'veihem v'lo tzalehem. There was, my shul was absolutely packed, but yet there was still room for everybody. It's interesting because we had also over Pesach and Shabbos, we have lots of people even with our COVID rules, but Baruch Hashem, we were able to fit in everybody. So what does he say is the miracle? He says like this. He says the miracle is that people came even though they had to stand in such a erect, frightening way. V'soivlim b'simcha. And they were able to cope with this with great simcha. Ve'eno margishim merov chedva shezochim lama b'mokum kadosh. That they were so happy they were able to stand and be in the Beis HaMikdash. The fact that everybody came, nobody was put off, nobody was frightened by the fact that there's going to be millions of people, that was the miracle. And it made a big impression on me, because if it was me, you're asking me, certainly with the Lag BaOmer, which is obviously a different situation, I don't think I would go. You know, too many crowds, too many people, and I was thinking to myself, that why do people go? What is it? Not saying why do they go, that's not what I meant, because there's a whole thing why they go and what they get out of it, but why do they go even though it's so crowded, it's so squashed in and so dangerous? And we see here this idea from the temple that they went and they were able to cope with it b'simcha. And says the Chasam Sofer further, That's why Hashem never made even more of a miracle, that there would not be squashiness. You ought to say, well, if they can bow down in great space, then why can't they stand in great space, right? If a God is making a miracle, that when they bow down, they have so much room, right? You have 8 feet to bow down. Why did God not make a miracle that when I'm standing, watching, I have lots of room? Why did he not make a miracle? And he says because he was so happy. God was so happy that his children came to see them even though the circumstances would be, for want of a better word, dangerous. Now let me show something else. And he quotes the Gemara here in Brachos 6b. The Gemara says like this. Here we do have English. Amar Abaye. Abaye says, Agra dekala duchka. Oops. Let's get that back. Where have we gone now? Where's it all disappeared to? Agra dekala duchka. Oh no, 5b. Why am I ended up in 5b? 6b. Hold on. I must have touched the button and it flew up. Okay. Let's go back to where we were before I mucked it up. Here. Ama Abaya. Agra dekala duchka. The reward for attending the Kala. The Kala was the big twice a year drasha that the Jews would come twice a year before Pesach and before Rosh Hashanah. There would be thousands, maybe millions of people in a field, all listening to the lecture. And says Abaya, the reward you get of going to this lecture is duchka, the crowding. Let's see what it says here. The reward for attending the Kala is for the crowding. Due to the large crowd, study was difficult. So the primary reward was given for the effort to hear and understand some part of the lecture. Which means, what the Gemara is saying, you couldn't really understand what was going on because you're so squashed, you're so tight. But the fact that everybody still went, the fact that people still said, you know what, I'm going to go to the shir, I'm going to be there, is what gave them the reward. It made a big impression on me that there is this Jewish idea from the Gemara, from the Chasam Sofer, that going to places, crowded places, jamming, packing yourself in, squashing in, is a great reward. And that's why when I was watching these scenes, of course it's so tragic and we mourn the loss of life, and I was wondering, well, why are these people doing it? Why are they squashing so much, so tight, so physically packed? Why are they doing it? This Gemara and this Chasam Sofer helped me out to be able to rationalize, and hopefully, oh, my internet connection is unstable. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. I just got a nasty message that my internet is unstable. Okay, so it gave me a little bit of understanding as to why it's a very Jewish thing, it seems, that people will still go and crowd themselves in. Of course, we have to do our bit to make sure things are safe, but just a bit of an understanding how people will go in even though things are so tight and so squashed. So when you went up to the Beis HaMikdash, you knew you were going to be squashed in. People still went. People said, you know what, I'm going to go to the Beis HaMikdash. I'm going to bring my carbon Pesach. There's a Gemara in Psachim, and I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but they did a count, and they saw that I think it was like 3 million people had come to Yerushalayim to offer the carbon Pesach 1 year. 3 million people. You imagine how constrained and tight that must have been, but yet people were not put off. And says the Chasam Sofer went on further. He said the next miracle, the Mishnah says, what happened in Yerushalayim is below Omar Lechavero. Nobody said to his friend, Sar le hamokem she'al in Yerushalayim. It's too crowded. Sar, it's too narrow. It's too crowded for me to go to Israel. To me to go to Yerushalayim, rather. So the way I always understood it was God always made a miracle that there was never any squashiness. That no matter how many millions came to Yerushalayim, there was always a miracle that it expanded somehow and you weren't squashed in. But the Chasam Sofer says, no, there was no miracle. What does the Mishnah say? V'lo Omar Lechavero. Nobody said it, which means really it was crowded. Really it was tight, it was packed. Everyone was standing shoulder. The beds must have been packed. The hotels, they were sleeping 20 in a room. It was crowded. But yet, loy omar lechaver, nobody said, this is not worth it, this is ridiculous. Everyone was so desperate for the inspiration of going to the Beis HaMikdash that they were able to put up with it. So that is a little bit more of an understanding, I was thinking, as to why people will go. And even though I was watching some of the scenes and the videos of the people sitting there dancing, it was very inspiring. I can imagine being in such a crowd, singing and dancing to Hashem, must have been so inspiring that people are willing to do that, comes from the Gemara. And talking about going to Yerushalayim, even though it's crowded, that's one of the ideas, going back to this week's Parsha, which is Bahar B'Chukosai. I want to talk a few things in a minute. But at the very end of the Parsha, just before we say Chazak, is the mitzvah of Maise Behema, which means, if you're a farmer, you got livestock, every 10th animal that's born, you have to take it to Yerushalayim. You have to offer it as a sacrifice. And as the Mishnah says, they did it 4 times a year. They would, after each set of animals was born. So there's a lot of animals. So you were going regularly to Eretz Yisrael, to Yerushalayim. You also had to go to bring the Bikurim, the first fruits. You had to go take it to Israel, Masha Sheni, the tithing of the first, second, fourth, and fifth years. So basically every year except for 2, you were going to take a 10th of your produce to Yerushalayim. And the question is, why are you going? What's all these mitzvahs to go to Yerushalayim? You got to bring a 10th of your... Why so much Yerushalayim? Well, what's going on? Why are there so many mitzvahs that have to go to the Beis HaMikdash? Right? If I'm a farmer, going each Yom Tov, although I suppose if I'm going for Yom Tov, I might try and take all my animals with me. But then if it's so busy, Pesach, you've got 3 million carbon Pesach, you can't offer all your animals for the Maisa because it's too busy. So I've got to go all the 3 Yom Tovs. I've got to go take my animals 2 or 3 times a year. I've got to bring my Bikurim, my first fruits that I had. I'm constantly going to the temple. So says the Ramban, that's exactly the point. Hashem wants people to constantly make the pilgrimage to go to the Beis HaMikdash, right? Don't forget, Israel is a big place. Well, not so big, but you know what I mean. It's a big place, and the temple is Beis HaMikdash was just in Yerushalayim. So Hashem wanted to give many mitzvahs that the people were constantly going to the Beis HaMikdash. So you would come, you would feel inspired, you would feel connected to Hashem, and then you would go back, you would inspire your family. Oh, wow, what a wonderful experience I had. It was amazing. You would inspire everybody. You would probably hear words of Torah from the Kohen Gadol, from the rabbis, the Sanhedrin that were there. And that's why there are so many mitzvahs that are incumbent upon us to go to Yerushalayim. Because we wanted to get that experience. And that's why people and Jews, they still go even in these tight, crowded places. And I hazard a guess, don't want to get too political over here, that even next year in Mitzvah Hashem, even after the tragedy this year, so sad, that there'll still be hordes of people going, right? Because people will still want to have that inspiration. And I wanted to find some justification for it. We should try and be, of course, we have to try and find out the reasons and try and put them right. That's not what I'm saying. But, we got to... The world was destroyed, or the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed from Sinas Chinam, right? People fell out with each other. And if you remember my shir before Tisha B'Av last year in the 3 weeks, we quoted from the Netziv, the Hamek Dovar, Pashas Masei and Pashas Bereshis, who said that what was the Sinas Chinam, the baseless hatred, was the different factions of Judaism, the Perushim and the Tzedukim, even though they were fundamentally different. But yet they were fighting so much. And of course, in Jerusalem, they had the people who wanted to fight the Romans and surrender to the Romans, and it was terrible. All these people fighting is what caused the Beis HaMikdash to be destroyed. So if we want it to be rebuilt, we have to try not to fight with these factions. So even though we might have conceptual differences between all different factions of Yiddishkeit, somehow we have to try and get along, each in their own beautiful way. Each has their own beautiful way of serving Hashem and doing things. Some things are not for me, some things are not for you. But we have to try and find love and affection amongst all Jews. And then hopefully we will merit the coming of Moshiach, where we will be squashed once again in the temple courtyard. But this time we will be enjoying it. So that's a little bit what I wanted to say about the tragedy in Meron. This week's parsha I just mentioned has lots of mitzvahs, but one mitzvah in particular I want to talk about is the mitzvah of ribis, the mitzvah of, or the aveira of charging interest. It says it twice in the parsha. Let's find it a second. It says, this is chapter 25, verse 36. Al tikach me'itoy neshech v'sarbis. Don't take from the person you're lending money to neshech v'sarbis. You should fear Hashem. Your brother shall live with you. Again, the next pasuk. Don't take interest. And don't take increase from his food. So 2 pasukim twice is the mitzvah not to take interest. Now this is a very difficult subject, and I don't want to get into all the nitty-gritty details of the halachos because it is very wide, but I want to talk about it a little bit, about the issue of taking interest. 2 ideas actually I want to bring out about things that are common. Basically, as we know, interest is not to gain more money than we lent. So if I gave you $100, I can't take back 120. That's basically the issa of ribis. If I lend you 3 pounds of food, you can't give me back 4 pounds of food because you're giving me back more than I gave you, like it says here, ochlecha, your food. So whether it's money, whether it's food, whether it's animals, whether it's livestock, whatever it is. First thing to say, though, is cheap, insignificant little things, the Gemara says, are mutter. So, for instance, if I borrow some sugar or some eggs, I say, you know what? I've run out of eggs. Oh, quickly, let me run next door, borrow some eggs. Oh, no, eggs is individual, so that's different. Let's say I will borrow sugar. So you say, yeah, here's some sugar, take some sugar. And then the next day I pay you back, say, here's the same sugar. Do I have to measure exactly how much sugar? Do I have to give the price of the sugar? So there they say that these things are so insignificant and people don't really care that it doesn't matter. You give a little bit back. That's not considered ribis. That's not considered interest. However, if it's something significant and individual like an egg, if I borrow 6 eggs, individual eggs, then I shouldn't give you back 7 eggs because that's an individual separate thing. But little bits of sugar, you might have a tiny little bit more here and there in the packet. That's not so significant. If I borrow your car, right, and it's got approximately 3/4 of a tank of gas, and I give it back approximately 3/4 of a tank, that's acceptable because these are minuscule things that people don't really bother too much about because it's not so significant. It's not conceptual ribis, so those things are permitted. But there are 2 very important things nowadays that people should be aware of. And that is, and this happened to me, so I lost money on it. If you take out a credit card or a loan in somebody else's name, right? It happens many times. People can't take out a credit. They can't borrow money because they haven't got a good credit line or whatever. They want to get a store credit card or whatever. So they say, hey, to their parents, to their brothers, whatever it is, will you take out this credit card? Will you buy this for me and I will pay you back every month the monthly fee? Okay, very nice. But now you cannot charge them the interest. So let's say, right, $100 they borrow, and then it's over let's call it easy, 10 months. So instead of paying $10 a month, you have to pay the APR, call it $11 a month. So you say, okay, I'll pay the $11 to the bank because it's my credit card, and then you each month pay me $11. Not allowed to do that. That is interest. Even they say, well, excuse me, I borrowed money for you. It's like you paying back. You're just paying back through me. That is still, nevertheless, completely forbidden. And it's something one must be very aware of. In fact, another thing they say very aware of is things like mortgages. I don't know if they do it in this country. I'm not sure. Baruch Hashem, I was able to get my own mortgage. But I know in England, certainly, if people didn't have good credit, then the bank will say, okay, get me a guarantor or somebody. So I'll say, you know what? I will guarantee the money. So if my credit is good and I have the assets, then the bank will do that in this country. You can do, right, okay. So then also you have a big problem because the Gemara says that a guarantor on a loan that has interest is also forbidden. So even though I'm not lending you money, I'm not even taking the money from you. The money you're paying directly to the bank. That's how it works, right? I'm just guaranteeing it, but you sign all the documents with the bank. You pay from your bank to the credit card, the mortgage company, and I'm just sitting every day doing nothing. That is still forbidden because you are the guarantor, and the Gemara learns out, not going into all the minutiae now, that if you are a guarantor, even if no money changes hands on a loan to somebody, it's like you are doing it, even if it's a goy giving it to a Jew, that is forbidden. Now, there are what's known as a heter iska. We discussed this. I remember, I think we still might have a few in the shul. I remember, and somebody came up to me after we gave the shir about heter iska, and we made the heter iska. Now, I didn't make it with him. I told him to go to somebody else. Because, with these things, you need to really have somebody who knows what they're doing, right? Because if you do it wrong, either you could cost somebody thousands of dollars because they'll say, you didn't quite right, even though there are standard forms, which basically what it does is it turns the loan into a business. So therefore, instead of me giving you $100 and you giving me back $110, so the $10 is interest, it's somehow some sort of a business transaction, and you're paying me $10 for managing your business. You make me your business manager, and you're giving me wages. The downside of a heter iska, this way of getting out of interest, is if this guy turns around and says, sorry, I can't pay, technically he doesn't have to pay because it's a business. If the business goes bankrupt, you don't have to pay. So you could lose all your money. So it's not not a hard and fast, oh yes, we'll do this and we'll get money. And there are special ones for this mortgage bank that I just said is forbidden to be a guarantor for a Jewish person for a mortgage. There is a special heter iska that works for that too. So there are ways, but I'm just bringing out that you need to look into these things and do it properly. To make sure you don't transgress the Issur of Ribis, which is supposed to be a very serious Issur, very serious prohibition, and to make sure you don't lose out your money and that you can get your money back in whichever way that you could. And now we talk about controversial halachic rulings in today's day and age. And I think of things like the heter iska. Can you imagine the controversy when this rabbi, I can't remember who came out with it, some big rich, I can't remember off the top of my head. Can you imagine the controversy? All of a sudden people never lent with interest, and all of a sudden one rabbi says, I have a loophole that I can work out to make this into a business. Can you imagine the crazy, now it's a few hundred years, so it's already more accepted, but can you imagine the furore that must have been caused when you heard all this craziness? That must have been same with the selling of the chametz. Can you imagine the furore when let's sell the chametz? What do you mean? Don't have to get rid of it. Can you imagine the furore that was caused? But now these things are accepted. Oh, seems to have frozen. Can you still hear me, or am I frozen?
Yes.
You can still hear me. Good, because everybody here is frozen. Okay, so that's a little basic introduction to the mitzvah of ribis. Now, one other thing, which actually applies to shuls, and you have to be careful, is that another idea called agar and nota. Agar is an Aramaic word for reward, and nota means guarding. So the expression translates as reward for guarding, which means it's forbidden to say, you know what, I will pay you now $1,000 for you to give me $1,000 worth of grain in 6 months at the price now. So I'm giving him the money, so he's keeping the money for me, so he's gaining now that he has my money for 6 months. So you have an issue, how do you work that out? So you have to be careful about how you handle money paid in advance for something later. If you have the goods now, but you just say, I'm going to give it to you later, that's fine. But if you say, I can only buy it in 8 months, it's only going to be available, you have to be concerned that I'm giving him money. He can use my money for 8 months, and he's benefiting from it for 8 months. He can spend it, use it, before he has to give me the goods. So these are some just ideas that one has to be aware of when giving interest. Now let's try and understand a little bit, why is interest forbidden? We see from this week's Pasha that the Torah clearly indicates we must have a capitalist economy, right? It says quite clearly, you make money, talks about buying and selling. Of course, it says you should be honest, and it says that you can't overcharge and you can't whatever. Many mitzvahs, if somebody buys something from you, you have to allow them to buy it back if they get enough money, depending on certain conditions. So we see clearly the Torah allows capitalism to take place with a socialist aspect. When your brother becomes low, he gets poor, you have to support him, you have to buy things for him, and then eventually it says, right, you have to give him tzedakah if he has nothing. Or hisiga yodo v'nigal, you got to help him, make sure he has enough money. So it's basically capitalism with a little bit of socialism mixed in, right? So you have the capitalists are allowed to make industry, make money, and so on, but you have to look after the people at the bottom of society. That's basically what the Torah is saying. So why then is interest forbidden? Interest, making money from interest, is one thing that is a very important part of making money. People say, well, you know what? Why should I lend you money? It goes on all over the world. I'm taking the risk of lending you money. You must reward me for my risk, right? Like some of these businesses that pay millions and they sit back, do nothing, but they get all the money because they're the ones putting up all the risk, all the effort. They're not doing any effort, right? You're sweating your guts out, but they're the ones who have all the risk, the capital risk. So you pay for that risk. That's what is generally accepted in commerce. That's how it goes. So why is that forbidden? Okay, so you say, it says yishach, it bites, every day, compound interest, it gets more, it can ruin people. Okay, so then why, just like with other things, it says you can't charge more than a sixth of the value and other laws, why didn't it say, okay, we're limiting interest to, I don't know, a sixth, 1%, whatever it is. Why did they completely ban interest? Just like with these other monetary things, they limited it, right? They said, yes, you can make money, you can sell it, you can buy within parameters. But when it came to interest, completely forbidden. This whole avenue of making money is completely shut off, which is ironic. And I say ironic, I don't know if that's the right word, but how have Jews made their money throughout the millennia, right? The Jewish money lender. I mean, he made money. It's ironic that the Torah says only to Jews, right? It's prohibited to lend on interest to Jews, but it's permitted to lend to non-Jews. So how have Jews made all their money? Right? The Jewish money changer, the money lender, right? They made money on interest, but yet the Torah forbids it within Jewish lending. Why did it totally, completely shut off this whole avenue of business? So I saw two explanations, two conceptual ideas why. First idea is we just said, when I introduced this concept, that it's understood in the world that you reward risk, right? I'm taking all the risk with this capital. I should be rewarded for that risk. So I can't remember who says this. What is risk? Risk is saying something might go wrong, right? Something you might not pay. It might go, if it's a business loan, the business might go bankrupt and I've lost all my money. So I'm taking on the risk. But says Hashem, there is no risk with me. Don't tell me about risk. I'm running the world. I will tell you, yes, maybe you will lose all your money. Maybe I have decided that you're going to lose all that money. I've decided the guy won't pay you back, and you're going to lose it. It's not risk. There's no risk to God. He's the one making everything happen, whatever reasons he has, whatever his calculations are. He is making everything happen. So by God, there's no risk. So you turn around to the person and say, okay, I'm lending you money knowing that there's absolutely no risk to me lending you this money, because no matter what happens from here now, I am in God's hands. And if you think about it, it's one of the hardest things to get your head around. Look, I'm losing, I'm going to lose. I could potentially lose all this money. I could potentially fall flat on my face. Why should I do it? And Hashem is now testing you, right? If you like, showing you, do you really believe in me? Yes, you daven, yes, I get that. And you're learning. Yes, it's all amazing. I get it. But do you really believe in me? Do you really, when push comes to shove, do you really trust that I am the one who makes everything happen, and everything that happens comes from me. You do believe it? Then give him this money. Because no matter what happens, if you'll get it back, you won't get it back, that's up to me. Leave that to me. It's a test of emunah. And it goes further that interest is easy money, right? It's easy money. You're not working for it. Oh yes, here's some money and I'll just sit back and the money will come in. You're not working for it. You're not doing anything for it. Which in some ways, you would say, that should be the best way to do business, right? We can dedicate ourselves to Torah and to mitzvahs. Yeah, I'll sit all day and learn, won't have to lift a finger, and my money I'll lend out all this money and I'll get all this interest. Which is why, probably how a lot of people in our shuls work, right? They're busy all day, whatever they're doing, and their money is growing for them, right? That's how it works. So why, that would have been an easy way of doing it, right? I can sit and learn all day. Hashem says no. Because there is also this idea of bezeas hapecho toichal lechem. Now, though, this is also a difficult concept to understand, because it doesn't mean sometimes people earn money very easily, and so on. Sometimes people find it very hard, right? You have people who do manual labor, difficult, tough jobs, physically difficult, emotionally difficult, mentally difficult, and some people do, on the face of it, easier jobs. In fact, when we daven for parnasa, there's many prayers that say we should have parnasa benachas, easy, benokel, without putting in too much effort. I think everybody wants to become a millionaire without doing much work, right? Everybody would like that, right? And we daven, or we should daven, but Hashem is trying to say, no. Bezeas hapecho toichal lechem. Interest is easy money, right? Yes, my money is working for me. Yes, I'll just lend to here, and the money is working for me. Hashem wants bezeas hapecho, with the sweat of your brow. He said to Adam Harishon, right? Bezeas hapecho toichal lechem, with the sweat of your brow, you will earn your bread. Which is maybe why in Florida, all the retirees come to Florida. Why? Because it's so hot here. And if it's so hot, you sweat very easily. So I can have my money working for me in my bank, and I'm still sweating. So I can say, so those are just a couple of ideas. Either because Hashem is testing you to show you, don't you worry about risk. This is not risky. I have it all planned out. It's all me. And therefore, I decide, and if it's a risk, yes, you might lose it. Nobody says that just because you believe in Hashem means everything will be all right. Look what the tragedy happened to Meron. Of course we believe that came from Hashem. But in life, things that we see bad happen, right? People die. Everybody dies. That's soon as, like the Mishnah said, hayilodim. Soon as a person's born, lamos, their death is a ticking time till they die. That's what happens. People get ill and they don't survive. That's part of how Hashem is running the world. But we have to believe that everything is somehow for our good, somehow for the best. And that is the idea of not giving interest. Don't get the easy way and taking the risk. Hashem says, don't worry, there's no risk here. He won't give it you. The question is, and then why can you lend to goyim? If that's really the case, why are you allowed to give interest to goyim? So this is not, I'm not saying this is something that I completely understand, but it's sort of, a conceptual idea to try and understand this a little bit. What time is it? 8:22. So there's a couple of more things. Actually, it says some very scary things about people who lend interest. About one of the things that they don't get into the next world, and they don't have tchias hamezim. Those who lend on interest on purpose and so on. Loan sharks, right? The loan sharks who lend people money with terrible interest, and then they go around and break your legs if you don't pay, right? That's a terrible thing, because that is completely forbidden. Okay, so that's a little bit about interest. It's funny, but slavery has been in the news, obviously, the last few months, right? Slavery and the people who used to own slaves many hundreds of years ago, and so on, right? Didn't they rename a stadium, right? One of the stadiums was renamed because or a base, one of these. Anyway, slavery is in the news. But if you look in the Parsha this week, when it talks about, I don't like using the word slave. I like using the word servants, right? I mean, you have servants today, right? Servitude. If you think about it, when you go to a restaurant and you're being served, that's like servitude. But if you look in this week's parsha, you see how you had to treat servants, right? You mustn't overwork your servants, right? Here. You must not subjugate him through hard labor, right? You can't mistreat people. And many times, you mustn't even speak nastily to him. You must always speak to everybody with respect and treat people the way you would like to be treated. I remember my Rebbe said in school, and it was, we all laughed and we found it hilarious. But the Gemara in Kedushin says, if the master only has one nice coat, the servant has to wear the coat. If the master has one nice bed, servant has to get in the bed. If the master only has one horse, servant is on the horse and the master has to walk. That's what the Gemara says. So can you imagine a situation where you see somebody walking or a horse and carriage coming through the town? See a man on the horse, it's a bit like Haman and Mordechai, right? When they assume the guy on the horse was Haman, and the guy leading the horse was Mordechai, and she threw the daughter of Haman, threw all the excrement over the guy leading, which she thought was Mordechai, turned out to be Haman. So the same thing here. You see this guy in a beautiful coat, beautiful hat, right? Top of the range, iPhone. What are we up to now? iPhone 12, iPhone, whatever it is, right? He's got his big iPhone, he's driving his big Lexus, right? And you've got the guy behind him, right? He's got the iPhone 6, and he's not got the latest New York Junkies shirt. He's got 5 years ago's jersey, right? And he's driving in a Ford. And you think to yourself, oh yes, the guy in the Lexus with the iPhone 12, with the brand new clothes, yeah, he must be the master. Oh yeah, he's the master. And this guy here with the Ford and with the iPhone 6 and the not so nice clothes, he must be the servant or the slave. But no, it's the other way around, because the master has the obligation to make the slave better than, or at least not better, but at least equal. And if he only has one set of things, then he should give the slave, the servant, and therefore the servant is better than him. And you'd think, oh yes, look, that must be the master, but really it's the servant. So the Torah, the way it tells us to treat servants and to treat what people term as slaves, is better than most people treat their friends, right? And certainly today, the way most people teach their employees. And that's something that I want to say. Not that we have slaves or servants today, even in the Yiddish world, because when Yovel was abandoned, so were the slaves, because the slaves went free every 50 years. Well, 6 years they went free, and if they were having the hole in the ear, they stayed till Yovel, and then they had to go. After Yovel, there's nothing you can do. And well, you could buy them back again afterwards, but then, and so on. So we always have an end. There's no person is in perpetual slavery or servitude. If they get poor, you have to help them out. There's no such thing as being completely lost. There is always hope. Even somebody who sells all their houses, their possessions, their friends and their family, not friends necessarily, but their family has to bail them out. That's why it says here, that's where we learn out that the person you give tzedakah to first is your brother. Ger, the people who live with you in your town. And that's how we learn out you give these people first. And then you look after other people. That's why in our shul, when we give out our money from our fund, we give out to people here, because that's the main mitzvah, to give out to people. So I want to finish off with a bracha to everybody. Miss Hashem, next week is the last shir before Shavuos. Right, yes, the last shir before Shavuos, because Shavuos is a Monday. So next week we'll talk in Mitzvah Hashem about Shavuos, come up with a topic about that. But I want to give everybody a bracha. It's been a tough week, obviously, with what happened as we started off the shir with. And a lot of people are very upset, and obviously people who are involved are traumatized. But even the whole of Klal Yisrael feel sad and feel down about what happened, and feel it affects everybody. So I give everybody a bracha that, just like I said in my sermon on Shabbos, that just like when we had another bonfire on the Mizbeach in the first of Nisan, when we had the revelation of Hashem in the world and His Shechina coming down into the world, and we had Nadav and Avihu dying on that day. That was the precursor to Hashem coming down to this world. So the departure of these 45 souls should be the precursor to Hashem coming down, and to see the day, the fulfillment of the pasuk, Bila Hashem, Bila Mavis Lo Netzach Amocha Hashem Lekim Dima Me'al Kol Ponim Chepas Amoy Yosir Me'al Kol Haaretz Ki Hashem Diber. God will cause death to vanish in life eternal, and He will wipe away tears from off all faces. B'mheira v'yameinu, Amen. Now let's finish off with the Sphira. Did they change the board? Changing the board just in time. So if you have a Siddur, the Siddur I'm using is the Shul Siddur. It's on page 284, but you can say it with me. Should really say Krishma again first, but if we do that, people will whatever. So let's just do this. You should stand up when you say Krishma, when you say the Sphira, if at all possible, because that's the best way to do the mitzvah. Right, 284. Here we go. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu asfiras omer hayom shiva shloshim yom shehem chamisha shavuos u'shnei yomim la'omer. Today is 37 days, which makes 5 weeks and 2 days. Okay, anybody have anything they want to add? Let me stop the recording. Anybody have anything they want to add or say? No? Yes, Saul.
There were many free appearances